she is cheering at the sight of her own name. This is what theaters look like across the world, and it just keeps getting worse. The memes.
I truly do believe that. There's something wrong with her. She's disturbed, she's unhappy, and she thinks it's about feminism and the patriarchy and about abortion. But the reality is she's just not stable, like the majority of people in Hollywood. They're just not stable human beings. I would highly advise that you boycott this film, no matter how much your children love Snow White.
Flop. Snow White lost hundreds of millions of dollars for Disney. She decides to rage post behind every strong woman is herself.
No one on the right side of America can stand the star of this movie.
But you don't seemingly like your own character, so she comes off as an insufferable, whiny brat.
It was dropped on YouTube, and it instantly became the #1 most downvoted trailer in the history of the platform. That might be a humbling experience.
And to everyone who hates when I win, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her.
Oh my God.
And I can only hope
What does that mean?
that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line.
Then they decided to cast Rachel Zegler, who is Hispanic, as Snow White. Now, again, you can cast people however you want to cast people. I really don't care. However, Snow White, in which the description of the character is skin as white as snow, lips red as the rose, right? I mean, there's an actual physical description of the part. Not my fault it's written that way. It ain't racist to write it that way.
Disney's Snow White was supposed to be a billion-dollar blockbuster, a dazzling revival of the classic fairy tale that started it all. Instead, it became one of the most catastrophic box office flops in Hollywood history. And at the heart of the controversy, Rachel Zegler.
What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be. I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so.
An actress who, with just a few words, managed to turn an entire audience against her. What should have been a triumphant leading role quickly spiraled into a PR nightmare. From tone-deaf interviews that alienated fans to a viral meltdown that only made things worse, Rachel's attempt to defend herself did the exact opposite. The backlash was swift, relentless, and unforgiving.
Rachel Zegler thinking, oh, that 1937 movie, that's just, oh, it's tacky, it's weird, we're gonna change. Rachel Zegler thinking.
And when the movie finally hit theaters, the numbers confirmed what many had already predicted. Audiences had completely rejected this new Snow White. So, how did it all go so horribly wrong? How did a Disney princess movie, backed by one of the biggest studios in the world, crash and burn this hard? And what role did Rachel Zegler's own words play in the film's downfall? This is the full story of how Snow White went from Disney magic to an absolute disaster. Rachel Zegler had hoped to silence her critics. Instead, she managed to throw gasoline on an already raging fire. What was meant to be a heartfelt plea for understanding turned into one of the most widely mocked celebrity moments of the year. In a now viral video filmed from what appeared to be her bedroom, the Snow White actress looked into the camera with a mix of frustration and defiance. Her tone teetered between teary-eyed vulnerability and passive-aggressive indignation as she attempted to justify her past statements, insisting that despite all the online hate, people were still showing up to support her work. But rather than coming across as a misunderstood artist, Rachel's words only reinforced what many already believed, that she was completely out of touch with audiences. One particular moment stood out, where she compared herself to the winged victory of Samothrace, an ancient Greek statue displayed in pieces at the Louvre. She implied that despite her perceived flaws, people would still line up to see her. The comparison struck many as bizarre. An actress comparing herself to a legendary artifact seemed like the height of self-importance. It wasn't long before TikTok, Twitter, or as it's now called, X, and YouTube exploded with reaction videos, memes, and parody clips mocking her tone and choice of words.
That Rachel Zegler has posted. Decided to film herself in a theater totally empty giggling, tee-hee-heeing with total glee. Look at this. Look at this face.
Within minutes, her attempt at self-redemption had turned into yet another viral disaster. If there's one thing the internet never forgets, it's arrogance mixed with controversy. Rachel's meltdown instantly became meme fuel, with TikTokers stitching her video with everything from comedic reenactments to dramatic readings of her speech over music from Les Miserables. Twitter Us X, on the other hand, went into full chaos mode. People weren't just reacting to Rachel's words. They were digging up every controversial moment from the film's troubled production and promotional campaign. Clips resurfaced from old interviews where she had mocked the original 1937 Snow White, calling it outdated and weird. People recalled how she had proudly declared that her version of Snow White wouldn't be saved by a prince, and that she didn't even think the original film was a love story. Those comments, already controversial at the time, now came back to haunt her in the worst possible way. Adding fuel to the fire were the side-by-side comparisons of Rachel's interviews and those of her Snow White co-star Gal Gadot. While Gal had carefully navigated her responses to avoid controversy, Rachel had taken a far more dismissive approach, seemingly ridiculing the legacy of the beloved classic. And audiences? They noticed. The backlash wasn't just about Snow White, it became about Rachel herself. The numbers spoke for themselves. Snow White was not just a critical failure, it was a financial catastrophe of historic proportions for Disney. With a reported budget of $250 million, the film needed a massive opening weekend to stand any chance of breaking even. Instead, it debuted with a shockingly weak $43 million domestically. For context, The Little Mermaid, another Disney live-action remake, also faced backlash before release, but still managed a $95 million opening weekend. Even other Disney flops like Dumbo, 2019, had better box office performance. Theaters quickly took note. Within the first week, major cinema chains started reducing screenings, replacing Snow White with higher-performing films. Some theaters dropped the film entirely by week 2. Even Disney's infamous marketing machine couldn't save it. It became clear that the audience simply wasn't there. Whether it was due to Rachel Zegler's controversy, the backlash over the film's creative choices, or simply audience fatigue with Disney's remakes, the verdict was undeniable. Snow White was one of the biggest box office disasters in Disney history. As soon as Snow White bombed at the box office, the internet did what it does best, reviving past controversies and ensuring that Rachel Zegler's words were never forgotten. People weren't just pointing out Rachel's dismissive attitude toward the original 1937 Disney classic. They were dissecting her entire approach to the role. One of the most infamous clips featured Rachel laughing while saying she had only watched the original Snow White once as a child and thought it was outdated and weird. In another, she smugly stated that her version of Snow White wouldn't be saved by a prince and that she didn't consider it a love story at all. Fans of the original film were quick to push back, arguing that the romance was a crucial part of the fairy tale's magic. But even beyond nostalgia, there was a growing sense that Rachel simply didn't respect the material or the audience. It wasn't just Disney fans who took issue with her words. Moviegoers in general felt like they were being scolded for enjoying something classic. One viral tweet summed up the frustration perfectly. Imagine getting cast as an iconic Disney princess and then spending the entire press tour trashing the film that made it famous. It wasn't just bad PR, it was a complete failure in audience connection. And the internet wasn't about to let it slide. Content creators on YouTube made compilation videos of every controversial moment from Rachel's interviews, setting them to dramatic music for maximum effect. Memes exploded across platforms, with some users sarcastically editing her quotes over footage of the original Snow White, showing just how disconnected she was from the film's legacy. What made it worse was the way Rachel responded to the backlash. Instead of taking a step back and addressing fans' concerns with humility, she doubled down. In her now infamous video response, she compared herself to the winged victory of Samothrace, implying that despite the backlash, people would still line up to see her. The sheer level of self-importance in that statement rubbed many the wrong way. People weren't lining up. Box office numbers proved that. The reality was that audiences had rejected Snow White not just because of Rachel's comments, but because the entire production seemed to disrespect what people loved about the original. Amid the backlash, one person seemed to have read the situation perfectly: Gal Gadot. The Wonder Woman actress had shared the spotlight with Rachel during the film's promotional run, but unlike her younger co-star, she carefully avoided stepping into controversy. While Rachel made headlines for her dismissive attitude towards Snow White, Gal played it safe, offering neutral answers and sidestepping any hot-button topics. Fans quickly noticed how stark the difference was between their interview styles. When asked about the film's changes, Gal delivered polished, diplomatic responses. She praised the original story while also acknowledging the updates made for modern audiences.
Super enjoyed every second of it.
Rachel, on the other hand, leaned into an almost defiant stance, making it clear that she saw the original as outdated and problematic. By the time the movie premiered, it was obvious that Gal had distanced herself from the controversy. At the 2025 Oscars, the tension between the two actresses was palpable. While they walked the red carpet together, body language experts and gossip sites pointed out that Gal appeared visibly uncomfortable. She avoided making direct eye contact with Rachel, kept a noticeable physical distance, and interacted more with other actors than with her own co-star. This wasn't just speculation. Hollywood insiders soon reported that Gal's team had advised her to quietly distance herself from the Snow White disaster to protect her brand. Unlike Rachel, Gal had a strong Hollywood career, and she wasn't about to let one failed Disney remake drag her down. And it worked. While Rachel found herself at the center of an internet firestorm, Gal moved on to bigger projects. She booked new roles, secured brand deals, and continued her career without any major setbacks. Rachel, on the other hand, was becoming Hollywood's latest cautionary tale, a rising star whose own words had cost her the audience's goodwill. In the end, Snow White wasn't just a failed movie. It was a case study in how quickly Hollywood can turn on someone when they lose the public's favor. And for Rachel Zegler, the real question remained: was there a way to recover from this, or had she already sealed her fate? And that's perhaps the most brutal part of this entire situation. Hollywood doesn't waste time on stars who aren't profitable. Reports soon emerged that Rachel's future projects were being reconsidered. Studios that had once seen her as the next big thing were now hesitant. Her team reportedly scrambled to save her image, pitching her for redemption arcs in media. But there was a problem. Rachel hadn't done what many fallen stars do in this situation. She hadn't apologized, or shown humility, or even attempted to win audiences back. Instead, she doubled down. And that's a dangerous game to play in an industry that values perception over reality. The entertainment world is filled with stars who have recovered from career-ruining moments, but they all had one thing in common: the ability to read the room and pivot when necessary. Rachel? She seemed to be doing the opposite, reinforcing the very behaviors that got her into this mess. In the end, Snow White wasn't just a box office bomb. It became a case study in Hollywood PR failure. A cautionary tale about what happens when an actress loses touch with the audience that once supported her, and a lesson in how, sometimes, the worst enemy a rising star can have is themselves. But what do you think? Could Rachel Zegler have turned things around with a different approach, or was her downfall inevitable? Do you believe audiences were too harsh, or was the backlash justified? Let's get the conversation going. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Hollywood breakdowns and celebrity controversies. See you in the next one.